All right. So this is the first time SGDA is trying to use Twitch live. So bear with us if there's any technical difficulties. We're trying to figure everything out. I think we're gonna stand by just a couple minutes before we officially get started. But thank you everyone for joining. Okay, I think we've given it a couple minutes. I guess we can go ahead and start. So, welcome everybody. This is the best solution that we have to keep some of our talks going this semester. We're trying out something completely brand new to us, but we hope this all goes pretty well. Tonight we have Tyler Reed, who is a UTD alumni, going to be talking about environment art and contract studios. And yeah, but a little bit before we get into that, I just had two pretty quick announcements. Henry, if you don't mind changing the slide for me. Just a quick reminder, we will be selling t-shirts pretty soon. We have a pre-order form up. We're still working out some things behind the scenes so that we can actually accept money from people. So right now, this is just a pre-order form, but if you're interested in picking up an SGDA shirt, it'll support the club a little bit while also getting you some cool merch. So if you're interested, definitely visit the little link. And then also, I wanted to briefly mention our talk for next week. Tyler Tomaseski will be on stream talking about starting a new game studio. He is also a UTD alumni. So if you guys are interested in hearing about some indie development and kind of a little bit about some of DSOP stuff, also going to be a very great talk if you guys are interested in coming out to that. So with that said, I think we can kind of get into Tyler's portion of the night.
Am I on? Is it working? Cameron?
Yeah, you're coming through for me.
Sweet. Okay. I'm trying to like watch it on there, but it's very latency. Yeah, so hey guys. My name's Tyler Reed. I'm an environment artist at Nerve Software. And I think I spoke for an SGDA thing once in the past, but doing it online is definitely not my strong suit. So probably not going to be a super great flow to this talk, but I'm just going to kind of roll through some of the stuff I prepared. And officers, any of you guys feel that I have like skipped over something really obvious, or just have a question that you think people would ask at that point, feel free to hop on and interrupt me. It's not a very like streamlined presentation, so I'm just gonna kind of roll into it. Yeah. Okay. So who am I? Environment artist and Nerve Software. Talked about that. I've worked on Black Ops 4 and Doom Eternal. I'm from a really small town, like raccoons. Graduated at UTD, and I was a member and officer of SGDA, and now I'm in. I don't know what we're called. I guess just organizer of IGDA. So yeah. So a little overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'm trying to focus it in general for environment artists while also keeping it open for other devs and kind of just giving advice where I can with that kind of stuff. But in general, it will be focused a little more towards 3D artists and environment artists in general. Um, I'm going to talk a bit about applying and landing a job, kind of how I found my way through that, and just some general, I guess, tips and advice I have on that. A little bit about my studio, as well as just contract studios in general, because I think that's not something that you hear about a lot in ATech. I certainly wasn't super filled in on what those were, or that was an option to go into. I'll show off some stuff that I've worked on, and some useful resources for environment artists and devs in general. And then at the end, we can just do some questions if we want to source those from the chat, and hopefully, I will have useful answers for you guys. Um, so some stuff I've done before I start going off and giving advice and just kind of rambling on. I figured I'd provide some kind of proof that I at least semi know what I'm talking about. So this is a mini portfolio of some stuff I've done. So on the left, we got some Black Ops 4 stuff, a lot of prop work for that. On the right, these are some rooms that I made in Doom Eternal, some environment kits and stuff like that. This was an internal scene we did. I did some foliage and some lighting and stampy stuff. I was kind of all over the place on that one. This was a capstone piece that I did in Unreal Engine 4, where I modeled and textured everything from the ground up. And this was a lock that we had for a UTD assignment for, I think, modeling one. So this can confirm that I went to UTD and I know how to model and texture, because, I mean, look at that. That's me, right? So cool. So how to be a successful environment artist at UTD? So just have some simple class recommendations. Obviously, like modeling and texturing, one and two. Sculpting, if it's available. I'm not 100% sure what the curriculum looks like at this point. I'm sure it's changed up a little bit. But these were the classes that I took that I felt were really helpful. Environment art one and two. That was really like a turning point for me. After I went like I kind of started off like, yeah, I want to do 3D stuff, and I tried sculpting a little bit. I was like, maybe I want to get into characters, but environment art with Tim Lewis was really when I was like, oh, this is like what I want to focus on, and this is what I want to really get into. And then also independent study and capstone. I mean, obviously, I think everyone's going to do capstone, but if you're not familiar with independent study, it's something you can do. I think maybe only your senior year, but it's kind of similar to a capstone. You link up with a specific professor, and you're like, "This is the thing I'm going to study," and there's some kind of approval process for it. But essentially, you could just be like, "Yeah, I want to just instead of taking some filler class, I want to do an independent study on specifically material creation or just making an environment or something like that." So that's a good option to look into as well. So probably talk to your advisors about that. I'm not 100% sure how that was set up. I was lucky enough because I was just really like good pals with Tim Lewis at the time to be able to sync up my independent study and capstone together. And essentially, my independent study was material creation, but they were all materials for my capstone. So it was really just like an extra slice of the day that I could continue working on capstone. So something like that is really helpful when you're trying to like maximize the quality on that. Bonus classes that I also felt helped me out. Lighting and composition, that was a little more animation and rendering focused, but all those principles are going to come back. And as an environment artist, learning enough lighting to be able to make your stuff look good when you're putting it in portfolio is huge. Level design one, a lot of stuff that I've worked on has been like a lot of working off blockouts or even like kind of placing blockouts, building kits and stuff like that. So that's all good stuff to consider when you're doing that. Game lab, it's just good to be, understand like working with people and stuff like that. You're not going to make anything really useful for your portfolio as like an artist in there, unless you just have like some crazy incredible team. Most of that stuff's going to get thrown away, but it's really the experience of working people that's useful in there. And one that I should have added on to here was I think just design principles or intro to design or design one or something like that. And that was just a class where we sat around in a room and talked about like principles of design. And that stuff is mega super useful. It's something that I still study now. Like I remember when I started at ID, we sat down in a room with Hugo Martin, and he gave a talk on design, and it was all the same stuff, but it's like a bajillion different principles where it's like if you just learn all these by heart and incorporate them into like every piece, it's just going to be like just on like a base level, it will be genuinely compelling because it's got shapes and lines at certain angles and stuff like that. So that stuff is super super important, and I don't think people bring it up enough when talking about environment art because it's such a tech focused field. And then also on top of that, this would be outside of UTD but online classes. So CG Master Academy, I think CGMA, is a website that has some incredible online classes that you can do. And obviously, I mean, just like YouTube tutorials, all that stuff, like, you know, that's going to teach you things that, there's just not going to be classes for. Maybe your schedule doesn't line up for forever. So that is always a great supplement. And even if you're already taking all these other classes, do some of those because it's really helpful. Um, Realize the level of quality you need to hit. So, when I was in school, I was constantly looking like, okay, what's coming out? Like, if I look online and see someone's portfolio that's in the industry, like, what do I need to do to get from like where I'm at to that point? I think it's easy to kind of get bogged down and like compare yourself to like everyone else in the class, but really the end goal is like industry, level work, and whether that's stylized or realistic, that's just something to always keep in mind and kind of surround yourself with that. And a lot of times it can get depressing because like if you go on the main page of ArtStation, it's just all like super incredible stuff, and it's like, oh, I just found out how to texture a box today. So don't surround yourself with it to the point where it's just like sad, but at least like keep that in mind and like constantly strive towards that goal and hit as close to it as possible. You know, that part of that is like being realistic and just recognizing like you know I need to hit this specific goal, and maybe I don't get to that when I graduate. One of my plans was to deliver pizzas for like a year or two after I graduated because I was like, man, it's a hard industry to get into. My portfolio is like maybe not quite there. So if I don't get something small, I'm just gonna deliver pizzas, maybe work at a rock climbing gym, and just work on portfolio and keep trying to get it to that point. So not to be a downer, but always an option. Just make sure you know what you're trying to hit, and be realistic with where you're at in that and what you need to do to get there. And scope small, scope real small. A lot of people in my virtual environments class, one of the common things that I would notice is they do these huge scenes, and it was really cool. But when you're doing a portfolio piece, the bigger your scene is, the worse every like screenshot of it's going to look because you're losing out on all that time that you could spend detailing just one area. A lot of people would do an environment that's, maybe it's just one room, and that's small, but then it's like they're doing all four walls of the room and all four corners where you could just do maybe one corner of the room and just make it super super cool, or half the room or something like that. So I just always try to keep in mind like how small can I scope? Um, you know, and kind of when coming to planning on that as well, like when I planned my capstone, I planned it out so that I would be done like a month before the actual end date was. And I was like, this is like my minimum viable product. I want to make sure that I have like the main stuff done by then. And then, if I'm running ahead of time or running on time, like I can add in this extra stuff and polish it. But always have time for polish. Don't have some giant thing and be like, yeah, I can hopefully get it like you know, very like minimum viable product at the end of this, right? I mean, that's still like minimum viable product in the schedule that you made is like pretty good because normally things are going to run past that. But, push that schedule up and leave time for like polishing and adding in extra details because, that's where those points are really going to come in. So keeping up with the industry, again, that's one of those things where I was like constantly trying to surround myself with, what people are putting out and things like that. The industry, how do I put this in a good way? Uh, like scholastic institutions, like colleges and things like that, for them to create a class, it's got to go through a whole bunch of people and approvals and forms and things like that. Whereas the games industry is still in such a position where it's growing every single year. Um, and like the programs and the methods and the workflows that you're using are changing every single year as people are finding out new and better ways to do stuff, or you know, new programs are coming out and things like that. And that's just not something that like schools can really keep up with and have classes for in a way like that. And so, like I think now, the ATech labs have like crazy Alienwares and y'all probably have Substance Painter and stuff like that, but we didn't have any of that when I was in school. And I remember when I heard about Substance Painter, it was from Tim Lewis in Environment Art 1. And he was like, hey, I don't know how to teach this because like I've been a professor for a little bit now and have been out of the industry. But this is what I see everybody online doing. So like go on YouTube and figure it out. Like this is what y'all need to learn, even though I can't teach it and we don't have a class for it. And that's what you got to be doing. You have to be up to date on that stuff. And the stuff you learn in school is really good too. Like obviously learning my like obviously all this stuff helped me, but there's so much that you have to learn like outside of school. And the main thing that school taught me was just like how to learn that stuff, and how to like parse through tutorials and schedule things properly. But what you need to actually learn is something you'll have to figure out on your own. So yeah, and so some ways to supplement that, like obviously a big part of ATech is like the community and the friends and classmates you'll make. Bounce ideas off of them, see what they're doing. Pass around online links and resources together. That is a huge resource that you need to be making use of while you're here. Obviously, organizations, y'all are doing great because you're here. So good job. There's more beyond just the SGDA out there, but definitely like your local orgs are really important. Online groups, I am part of probably like 13 or something, like 3D art discords. You can just find those all over the place online and stuff like that. I actually, myself and Jordan Turner, another grad here, made like a UTD 3D Discord. I'll probably share the link with that somewhere. But there's so many groups of like people out there, and they all just have like open Discords, and you can just go in there and ask them questions, and like people will help you out. And it's just so cool to like see those communities kind of forming, because that's really only a recent thing that hasn't been around too often. It used to be you just go on Polycount and kind of post into the forum out in the void and like hope that you're talking to people, but now you can actually like join a discord of some professional artist somewhere and talk to him directly, and that's a really cool thing to see. And also the best social medias for 3D in my opinion would be Twitter and definitely ArtStation. If y'all don't have an ArtStation account, make one of those ASAP because that is super useful. I'll kind of show that off in a little bit when I go through my portfolio, but that is like the site you want to be on. And then yeah, so final thing, this was something I encountered a lot when I was at school, but like it can be really tempting to do group projects with people. And I'm not saying don't. Group projects are super important. But it was a thing where like for my capstone, for instance, there were several people that wanted to do like group capstones with me, and it would have been great. And I think we would have done really cool stuff. But as an environment artist specifically, being able to focus down on like a small scene and do and just being able to like focus on it and scope it for yourself, and not have to worry about like, oh, does it like work with the gameplay, or like how does it implement, with this and that. You're just gonna get way better stuff. And it's okay to be selfish in that way and be like, I just want to do my own thing and just like make the best art possible and not have to worry about gameplay limitations and stuff like that. Um, so that is what I mean by be selfish. Don't be a jerk. Do group projects; they're fun. Do game jams. Like all that stuff is super useful. Don't stress yourself out on only working on portfolio all the time. But also do. Cool. Getting a job. So obviously the first thing, finding out what studios are out there. So earlier when I said that I finished my capstone like a month early, my plan for that was, I would have a period of time where if I was way behind, I could catch up and polish it and actually finish it. But if I was at least like kind of on time, I would have all this time to do my research and prepare like applications for these studios and stuff, and hopefully get those out ahead of time before everybody else was graduating, and also just make sure I had time to like polish off my portfolio. So there's a lot of different resources for that. I can't go all over all of them here, but there's tons of websites and people you can talk to. But finding local studios and right now, obviously, with everything being remote, there's a lot more options out there for like, you know, you can work at like small places in California or things like that. So the world's kind of opening up in that way. So this is now a much bigger task because you got to find out who's doing remote and what studios are even out there and stuff like that. But yeah, step number one. Number two. So now that you found the studios, figure out which ones you like and focus your portfolio towards that. So my thought. Well, number one, I'm just not good at stylized stuff. So I was just always kind of dinky at that. So I was like, well, I guess I'll have to do realistic. But part of that as well was like my thought was for realism, a lot of realistic places are big AAA studios, and a lot of stylized stuff are the smaller ones. So if I was doing realistic, big AAA studios have more jobs. So hopefully, like if I did that, there'd be more job opportunities or something like that. But specifically, I was interested in not having to move, so I was looking at id Software. So I made this like Wolfenstein piece because I didn't want to like just copy like a Doom piece. Felt that was a little too on the nose, so I did a piece from Wolfenstein, which was like a similar kind of style, like the really curved metal pieces and a lot of hard surface stuff like that. So that was kind of my like appeal to like be like, hey, look, I can do your style, let me in. While also making sure that it focused on like it wasn't too focused to where I could only do that. Like maybe if you were going to do like a gearbox piece, unless you really wanted to get into gearbox, just don't do that as like your entire portfolio. Just make it one piece. So focus your pieces towards the style that you want, and when you're like applying for a specific studio, like having a piece that is kind of in their style is a really good thing to do. So as far as finding out what programs to use and what skills you should be working on and stuff like that, like job listings just have all that stuff for you. So like find that studio that you like, see, when they post something for environment artists, like what are they wanting from people? And that's the stuff you should be hitting. So you don't need to wait until you have your portfolio together and you're ready to apply to look up job listings. Like that is all useful information now, and you should honestly be keeping up with those. And part of that too is just getting your like system set up for looking for jobs. Like I get notifications in my email all the time, and I always want to mute them, but I'm like, well, it'll probably be useful eventually. So that's like, another thing to kind of surround yourself with and keep up to date with and seeing, you know, what new programs are slowly making their way onto those. And, oh, now people are like, I'm seeing World Machine and a bunch of different studios, environment art postings. So maybe I should look into that. So that's a good one. So this one's a little weird, but don't be afraid to reach out and cold call people. This was something that I was doing when I was looking for freelance work recently. Was hitting up some studios, and I would hit them up on LinkedIn. And I'm not saying that you should go do this because I think as a student it's a little bit different than when you're, have some games under your belt and something like that. But right now with everything remote, I think it's a lot less weird to do. So if you're looking into a specific studio and you're really serious about it, and maybe your portfolio is in a good place, or you have just a really specific question that you needed answered, don't be afraid to reach out and like hit these people up on Twitter or, ArtStation or whatever and message them because most of these people are really willing to talk. I think there was a guy that I messaged to on a I think it was a artist for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I wanted to know how he made the grapes on this tree. So I just commented, and I was like, "Hey man, like, how'd you make those grapes?" And he sent like a huge paragraph telling me about it, and I was like, "Wow, this is really cool information," and I put in minimal effort to find it. So do that. That's really good stuff. Um, Again, when I was working on the Wolfenstein piece, I hit up a bunch of the Wolfenstein devs. I think they're all in like I think they're from Sweden. I think they're in Malmo. I might be incorrect. They're all overseas guys, and I hit them up on ArtStation, and I chatted with like five of those guys, and just like ask them questions and stuff. And I ended up talking with the guy that did the room that I recreated, and that was a really interesting thing to just, these people are like, I think you tend to kind of idolize some of these people, or maybe like make them heroes in your head. Man, it might just be me. But like the guys from id, like they're all super incredible artists, and these are people I've been following for years. And when I got to work there, like in house, and I was just like a couple desk away from these dudes, and they're eating weird lunches and stuff like that. I'm like, man, these are just like, they're just dudes, just normal people. So yeah, I think it's okay to reach out to people. I mean, don't be annoying, and like don't go be like, hey, Tyler Reed told me it's okay to like add you on LinkedIn and bug you about student stuff. But there's a line. Presentation is 20% of your portfolio. So this is something I don't think that is really talked about in environment art, and especially as a student, like you're focused a lot on the technical aspects and like how do I make this look correct and how do I make this cool. But presentation and like the graphic design of your portfolio and the rendering and stuff, it can really make like a boo boo stinky project look super professional. So if this is the end of the slide, yeah, I'm gonna hop over to my art station real quick and kind of give an idea of what I mean. So this is a project that I have hidden because I'm not able to post my Doom stuff yet. But so for instance, so we got some renders of stuff like that. Um, and first off, I think these renders are like cool. I spent a lot of time like picking out angle and running it through like Photoshop, getting the right colors and stuff. Took like probably like 20 minutes or something to make this stupid GIF work in here. But it's a little bit extra stuff. These title cards is kind of what I wanted to talk about. So I'm like super into these. And that may just be because I made them and spent like 2 hours like iterating on them with one of my environment art friends. Um, so this is like I made these for each section, so it's kind of broken up into different sections, and it's like a slice of that piece that's like blurred a little bit, and then has like the Doom font over it. And I don't want to like toot my own horn too much, but I really feel like it brings this like project display kind of to the next level. So that's kind of what I mean by like presentation, like taking time to like take, 500 photos while playing through this game, and then like, go through those, figure out which ones really fit like composition and design ideas, and then figure out like, which of these are important enough to include, what kind of, editing or extra stuff can I do to like really take this piece to the next level, and that kind of stuff. So that's one example. Let's see. On this one, picking out like even like picking out which shots are going to go first. How you kind of want the flow. Um, did some like progress gifs down here, like that kind of stuff's really cool to see. Doing little silly renders where like you take one render and fade it with another, like just stuff like that, to where it's like, man, this guy spent like a ton of time showing this stuff off. Like I know that even if we stick him on something that's not just like go make art, like he's gonna put 100% into it and like really do some work on that. Um, what else is there? Oh yeah, little 3D viewer, pretty neat. Didn't take as much time as you'd think to make, but that's the kind of stuff. Oh, also while I'm here, tangent, I put a little Easter egg in here that says "Hire me, please." And when I went to id and interviewed with them, they opened with that. They pulled up the 3D viewer and scrolled right to that, and that was terrifying. They liked it, thankfully, but I was like, "Oh my god, it's over." Cool. So yeah, presentation, make an art station. A lot of the stuff that I've done in my portfolio is because I've seen it on other people's portfolios in ArtStation, and I'm like, man, that's a really good idea. I'm gonna steal that. So look and see which ones you like, and stuff that really like speaks to you. Because there's nothing wrong with like taking those themes and ideas and applying them to your own stuff. So yeah, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about contract studios. So contract studios, if you're not familiar, are studios that don't produce like their own internal games, but exist to like hop onto other like mostly AAA games and help provide additional like dev support. So this is a screenshot from I think The Last of Us Part 2 credits. And so these are just like a couple different contract studios. So this also comes to like, looking for what studios are out there. Um like when I'm looking for work and stuff like that, like I'll play a game that I like and I'll go to the credits and I'll be like, okay, I know who made this game and I know like all these major devs, but like what are some contract studios that worked on this? Because these are places that not a lot of people are applying to. Most people are applying directly to like Blizzard and game studios that you've actually heard of, but these contract studios are out there and they're working on a ton of these cool projects anyway, providing either art support or programming support or concept support, whatever. And it's a really good way to get a huge variety of experience, and get to work on some awesome projects. So that's the studio that I work at, Nerve Software. That's what we do. So essentially, I started there, and the first project we were on was Call of Duty Black Ops 4. And I was like, oh my God, like I just graduated 2 weeks ago. Like this is terrifying. And we did that, did some internal stuff, worked on Doom, and that's all just like, you know, I I like to think that my id interview was going well enough that I could have maybe gotten there. Um, I interviewed at both places and ended up going with Nerve before I finished their art test. But you know, it's a place that I could get into and then work on both of these projects without having to like, number one, move to California and wherever all the COD studios are at, and get crunched to death over there and spend like 4 years working on one project. But I got to add these titles to my belt and get to experience the different workflows and different programs and just learn so much so fast, at a place that at the end of the day was like easier to get into. And so I'm not sure what contract studios look like for programmers or other devs, but at least for like artists, that can go for characters, concepts, environment, whatever. There's a ton of them out there for that kind of stuff, and it's definitely something you should look into. So in addition to just like art studios for AAA games, there's also contract places that do like AR and VR work. So some of the local ones for that are like Groove Jones, 900 pounds, Ford XP. They do essentially like I don't know what the actual word for it is, but it's like media promotion kind of. So I interned at Groove Jones for about 4 months, and then I freelanced with them for about a month, kind of recently. And essentially, what they do is like they'll make these AR, VR, small projects that are made to like promote, some business or some event or something like that. That'll be like at that event. It's all like, getting the corporate logo to stick in your head or whatever while you're like playing some VR thing and having some cool experience. Um, but it's all contract based, so it's another thing where you can get into these studios and you're hopping around, and these contracts, in my mind, they're not as cool as like working on some big shiny AAA game, but it's still that variety, so you're still getting to learn all these different things and kind of wear a lot of different hats while you're kind of jumping around on those. And I think that is a fantastic place to learn. And also, there's a lot of places out there other than just game studios and animation studios, so looking into what other options exist out there. Yeah, and then Nerve. Okay, yeah. So Nerve. Just a little bit about my studio in particular. I know I talked about it a little bit. But yeah. So Nerve was like, I'm trying to remember when I was applying to places. I think I applied to like 21 different places after I finished my portfolio and my capstone. And I heard back from, I think, two of those places. One was from Ubisoft. They said no. And then the other was from id. Didn't hear back from anyone else. And id was because I had bugged, like, I had known some people that worked there and I bugged them to recommend me. And then I think one of the professors at UTD recommended me as well. So they were like, oh, also, I like bugged the social media person on their Twitter. And it wasn't like an annoying bug. It was like I was like, "Hey, I made this Wolfenstein thing. Like, is this? I don't know what y'all do with fan art or whatever, but like, here's the thing." And I think she like showed that to some people. So I was coming at it like three different angles. So they had to respond to me eventually. So I heard back from them. I was doing interviews with them, and I had never applied to Nerve, funnily enough. But they hit me up on ArtStation, And I had seen them online, but their website was really outdated, and like they didn't have any hiring positions or something. And later I learned that was just because they were a small studio, and they never like put up positions really. They just asked around, and they're like, "Hey, do y'all know like a 3D artist? We need a new person." And it was like all recommendation based. But I didn't know that they were still like open. I thought they had like died, kind of, because they just didn't really update their website. So I heard from them, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like I guess that seems kind of cool, but like obviously I'm gonna want to work at id. So I was like, okay, we have an interview set with y'all. Like I'll put it like the day before my id one, so that I can like get some practice interviewing and really nail the id one, which is, sounds kind of shitty, but like I mean that's a smart thing to do. I stand by that. But the interview went super well, and just everybody there was super nice. And once I actually kind of learned what the studio is about, I was really into it. And then I went to the interview, and I think that went really well too. But they had this like big art test for me, and I'd heard some stuff where they like the larger studios can take a really long time to get back to you hiring and stuff like that. So uh, I had a second interview with Nerve, talked to them for a bit, and they offered me the job. So I was like, man, like, do I take this job that's like offered, or do I like go try to get this art test with it and really figure it out? And it was a real like critical moment for me, and I was like, I'm gonna trust my gut and go with Nerve because those guys seem really nice. Um, and I ended up getting to work at it anyway, because after the Black Ops 4 project, we contracted with them for Doom Eternal, and because they're right down the street, we actually got to go to the studio and work in house for a year. And man, that was like, as someone who graduated like pretty much like a year prior, that was freaking awesome. So I've been really lucky on kind of my journey through this stuff and some of the opportunities I've gotten. And it's all because they hit me up on ArtStation and kind of came out of nowhere. So that's just another thing. Like, know what studios are out there, and don't be afraid to like email them and just see what positions they have, because sometimes they don't talk about it. That's something that I learned kind of from that situation too, because there were a lot of places that were nearby that I was like, man, I want to work at those, but they didn't have positions open, so I never, reached out or anything. But like, if your stuff's in the position and like that they would be interested in that, like just message them, reach out on Twitter or whatever. If they have like a HR manager, like hit them up, see what's going on with that, because you'll miss opportunities like that. But yeah, so that's Nerve and Contract Studios. So just some useful resources in general for art. I know I've harped on ArtStation a lot, but I am still surprised when someone sends me a portfolio and it's like on their, tiny, what do you call it, like WebEx, QuickX or something. I don't know, something other than ArtStation. ArtStation's all I know, so I don't remember any other URLs. Discord communities, talked about those a lot, but you can find all kinds of those online. There's like UE4 sponsored communities and stuff like that. Tons of super useful information in those. Local orgs, again, great job. DSOP's a great one as well. There's not a great local org for like 3D stuff as far as I know, but there's enough around. I know a bunch of short guys does a ton of events for, they're a little more animation focused, but they kind of do animation and game dev, and they have some incredible speakers like Keegan King come down and talk about material creation and stuff like that. So definitely be plugged into those because you don't want to miss any of those talks. Tim Lewis, talked about him a little bit, but he is like my favorite professor at UTD. He kind of came on, I guess, like my junior year, and kind of took over the environment art thing. But like I said, this awesome professor was very open with like, hey, I don't know how to do this stuff, but like I know it's important, so go learn this, and I'll make very open projects where you can kind of focus on the stuff you're wanting to learn and apply it to that. So if you can take a class with Tim Lewis, doesn't even have to be environment art. I don't know what he teaches, but that's a great guy. And even if you can't take a class with him and you're really good at 3D, hit him up, because he's probably not going to be annoyed by that, because he's just a super good dude. And then online challenges. So you're probably familiar with this if you're into environment art at all, but ArtStation, Polycount, a lot of these places will host online challenges. And I think the ArtStation ones are really legit and have prizes and stuff like that. And the Polycount ones are like monthly and kind of just for fun. But do that stuff because it's super, super useful. You can kind of look at it like a game jam that's like a month long or whatever. Get together with some friends and be like, hey, this is the concept that they're providing, and let's make some props for this or whatever, and kind of just it's a good way to get your stuff out there, kind of see other people. A lot of these have like work in progress threads, and you can kind of see people's thought processes as they're going through it. After a challenge, I love to go through and just dissect, what people were thinking and what kind of direction they took and how they set their stuff up and planned it. It's really cool to be a part of all that. And again, you see somebody with a really cool piece, they're going to want to talk about it. So just hit them up, man. Like people are super down to talk, especially right now while we're all spread out and the world's ending. So, go for it. Yeah. So now questions. Just a little recap and some info. If you guys want to hit me up on Twitter or follow me on ArtStation, whatever. But yeah, if we want to do questions now, that's pretty much all I have to talk about.
Yeah, so I saw there was one question floating around in chat. I know
Hmm.
Ellie kind of got to it a little bit, but if you're able to kind of talk a little bit about other positions in contract studios, one person in particular asked about concept art and whether those positions are pretty common.
Yeah, yeah. So I know there's specifically studios that are like concept focused. In my experience at Nerve, we just have one concept artist, but he's been around for like 13 years and he's super good. And he was like my office mate, so I got to talk to him a lot. But from what I've seen, I'm pretty sure there's contract studios that are like, yeah, we're like a concept art contract studio, and just hit us up when you need concept art, and we've got people that can focus on different things. Again, not my like area, so I haven't really looked into it, but I think that that's a thing. So I'd look for it. But yeah.
Cool. One other person is asking if you were part of a concentration.
Not 100% sure what that
I
means.
don't know either. Maybe that means like a tech pathway.
Oh, that could be. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. New terms. Okay, yeah, that's all
Yeah.
funky new stuff. I mean, I only graduated like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or something like that. So when I was starting at ATech, it was much more like toolboxy, and it was like these are all ATech classes you can take, and like if they have a two, you have to take this other one first, and that's pretty much the only restriction. Um, so I think they started pathways my senior year, or maybe like halfway through my junior year or something. So I'm not super familiar with those. And then I know they like revamped it like 3 or 4 times since they made them, so it's kind of funky. But no, I'm not 100% sure how those go. I know there was some pushback on them when I was there. I think the like portfolio review stuff maybe is kind of cool. But like I said, I wasn't part of it, so I'm not 100% sure how it is to actually be in those.
Okay, someone else is asking what networking opportunities have been the most lucrative for you.
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, let's see. Honestly, I think the most useful like networking event was probably the like Animation Guild SGDA one where they would have speakers come talk, and then you could like pick their brains afterwards. Met some really cool people through that. I'm trying to think of like how I'd network. I tried to go to game dev drink ups, but I was always kind of scared of them because I didn't really like. I don't know. I was just a student. I didn't really know what to talk about. But if you have some friends, those are fun to go check out. Um, IGDA Winter Party is a good one. Met a lot of cool people there, and that one I feel like gets a lot of like actual like big studio developers at it. So that's a good one to go to as well. And then online stuff is really good. Like I said, I met a lot of people through Discord. Like uh, one of the I think one of the Insomniac artists. I joined his Discord like a while ago, and then he ended up coming to Chilenium as one of the sponsors or people that walk around and help you out. So then I went there and did the game jam, and I was also like, "Hey man, I'm here. Like I'm in your Discord. I'm so and so," and I got to talk to him for a little bit. So that was a cool way to connect too. So there's tons of stuff out there. You just kind of try to manage it all, and you'll be surprised how many like weird connections get made.
Cool. Uh, what is the best advice that you might give to your freshman self if you could like go back in time?
Hmm. I would have probably gotten into Blender sooner. One thing that I was not as I mean, this may just be specifically the games that I've worked on and not so much how it is normally. Um, but this was something I was surprised to figure out like once I got into the industry and started working on projects was it's a lot more like kit bashing and stuff like that. And I don't know necessarily that that's something you need to like focus on and learn while working on your portfolio. But you should definitely like try just grabbing some Quixel assets and like putting a piece together because that is a very definite like skill that you will use as an environment artist in like a major production. And then another piece of advice that I give to a lot of my friends once they land their first industry job or something like that. Um, but once you're like, when I started off at Nerve, I got hired 2 weeks before I actually hit my graduation date. So I got started there, and like all of a sudden, I'm working on Call of Duty, which was a game that I played like religiously as a kid, and I was like, oh my god, like I am so out of my league that it's crazy, and I was super terrified to ask people questions because I was like, man, if it was stuff like I didn't know how to like export a normal map correctly for this project, and I was like, looking back on it, there's like a specific way they wanted to do it. And like it wasn't super hard, but it wasn't, like, super straightforward, but it wouldn't have been a big deal if I asked at all. But I was terrified, man. I was like, "Dude, if I ask, like, something this dumb, they're gonna be like, oh, like, this dude just graduated, like, he doesn't belong here, let's get him out.'" But that's just, like, you gotta be open to asking questions, and I probably wasted a ton of the studio's time by, like, just putting my head down and be like, "No, I don't wanna, like, embarrass myself. I'm gonna try to figure this out on my own." So that may not apply right now, but that is something to keep in mind. I think that could apply for classes too. Like, don't be afraid to ask dumb questions because you know people aren't generally just like awful and mean.
All right. We have a question. Would you recommend like watching a lot of tutorials for specific software, or more general and conceptual tutorials that kind of bring together, practices for a lot of different software?
Okay, yeah, that's a that's a good one. So that kind of goes into the thing I was saying about being like very open to learning new stuff outside of class. Like I said, these programs change every year. So I think it's important to learn like the kind of general overview, but also, when you're a student and you're trying to make your portfolio look as cool as possible, you have to get into like the nitty gritty of the softwares you're working with. So, it's kind of an annoying answer, but like both. Um, because part of my thing was like I want to get as good at Maya as possible and as good at making stuff look cool and unreal as possible. And then I can just like maximize and like hyper focus that and just try to make like a really cool piece. But then when I got to Nerve, it was like, I did some Maya stuff for COD, but when we went to ID, they're all Moto users. So they were like, hey, here's like a week and a half to like learn how to model in this completely new program, whereas I spent the past 4 years just figuring out how to model in the first place and it was all in Maya, so that was like terrifying. But it really didn't take that long to adjust those skills that I had picked up in that one program to another one. And when we got done with Moto, then we came back and we're like, we're gonna use Blender now because it's cheaper. So then I've like been readjusting to Blender with that stuff. So that's gonna happen. But in general, it's not that hard to like transfer a lot of those skills between programs. So I would just focus on like getting in the nitty gritty, getting really technical with it, and if you have to switch later, you have to switch.
All right. Do you know if there's like a certain sweet spot for a number of pieces in your portfolio, or
Ooh.
would you recommend like getting as much mileage as possible out of each piece?
I will answer that by showing some of my janky student work. I think the best thing is just figuring out like which pieces are going to carry the weight the most. I definitely wouldn't aim for quantity, but you also want to have more than like one or maybe two, unless they're just like really cool big pieces. So I think when I got the job at Nerve, I had skip these three. I had the Wolfenstein piece, the ATEC classroom, the Simon Salen Hag piece, and I think this TV. I think so. I think that was 4. These are pretty big projects. This one's a little smaller, and this is like essentially just a prop. So my thought there was like, okay, show some cool environments, and then show that I can do like a detailed prop, and like that should be good. This was all stuff that I had in there previously and ended up cutting because like like this accordion stuff's pretty cool, but it's not like weighing it against the other projects, like it is arbitrarily like it's worse than this. So like all it's going to do is bring the portfolio down. So I think I would aim to have uh 3 to 4 like at least like medium-sized projects and like a good hero piece prop or whatever. But don't worry about having more than that, and like only have your best work, because every additional thing you add on just to have quality and or to have quantity is going to bring it down. Yeah, it's a hard call to make sometimes because I liked a lot of these. But yeah.
So we also have a question from Discord apparently.
Ooh.
Do environmental and character modeling go hand in hand, or do you struggle with working on character modeling at all?
So uh yeah, so character modeling and like character sculpting really is really kind of its own beast. At a lot of places you're gonna have someone that specifically focuses on that hardcore. I'll actually switch back over to here. So I had done like some character modeling and stuff. Uh some like figure stuff, little fiddlesticks, some stuff like that. So I was familiar enough with it to the point where like if I was making an environment and needed to make like a statue of something, I could probably do that and have it look okay. But I don't think I ever got to the point where I would have been comfortable being like a character model, like a character artist at some big studio or something like that. So I think that if you're interested in uh, that's probably what you should focus and pursue. Likewise, like if you're interested in both, like essentially choose one to focus on, at least as a student. And then maybe you can kind of pick up the other one later and move into that role. But I think as far as breaking in, you're really better off focusing your time and effort into like really getting a focused portfolio of like one, where it's just really cool.
All right. How do you think next generation hardware will affect the production pipeline for video game environment artists?
Oh man.
So basically with things like ray tracing, polygon counts, texture memory, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I watched the GTX talk the other day, and a lot of huge tech leaps coming out. I think ray tracing can make scenes that aren't as cool look a lot cooler. So I think that'll kind of speed some things up. Um, I kind of mentioned earlier the Quixel Megapack stuff. Like, there's so much changing in the landscape of like how environments are made, and stuff like that. Like, uh, trim sheets are coming along. Like Call of Duty, it's like all just assets and kits and materials, and using the same materials on like every single thing. And the workflows are just getting faster and faster. And I think a lot of this new tech is going to maybe not completely replace some of the ways that we make stuff now, but definitely enhance it and definitely like speed it up in a lot of ways. And I think we've seen that a lot already with like photogrammetry and like these Quixel assets. You're able to have one person make like an entire forest in like a week, and it's just like all pre-made stuff and it looks incredible. And speeding up the rest of this stuff, you're able to get more and more out of the pieces you're placing. uh, like when I was at id, part of it is just their engine is like crazy about crunching polys. But also it's just like the tech's at the point where like poly count didn't matter to those guys, to an extent. Like you couldn't do anything crazy, but like there was never any poly count on a prop or something like that. It was just like, yeah, make it look really cool. And the only thing I was ever told was to like add more subdivisions to it. So that's just giving artists more and more freedom, and takes less and less time to make those assets really cool looking.
So as far as Quixel goes, would you say that that's like the clear industry standard for PBR material tools, or something else?
Probably. Like if you were gonna like aim for a prop or something, like should you try to hit that level of quality? Is that what you're meaning?
It's more of a question of like what is the industry standard, like what software.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm a big Unreal Engine fan, so I always go with that. Substance Paint or Substance Design are really important. The modeling packages right now, I think those are kind of just like all over the place. I've been really enjoying Blender, and I think that's fantastic for students because it's totally free software that's being really heavily supported right now. So that's great. The Quixel software, I haven't actually messed with that much. Quixel Bridge just lets you take some of those like scanned assets from their library and plug them into Unreal really easy. But I haven't actually used those softwares for like any texturing or something like that. Mainly just Substance Painter and Designer.
All right. Do you have like a favorite piece that you've worked on or something that you're most proud of?
Hmm. Let's see. I'm really into this Wolfenstein thing. Uh, yeah, I don't know if I showed it off, but this was the environment art classroom that we were in. I'm a fan of that one to show like ETD students because I feel like it was like pretty accurate, but also it's just a very like it probably looks different now that y'all have your spaceship Alienwares and stuff in there, but it was a very like burned into your brain kind of setting, for anyone that did game lab or environment art. But I think the Wolfenstein piece is probably my favorite just because that's essentially like what ended up, helping me get a job and was kind of the first project that like I planned out correctly and didn't like crunch myself to death on. And I was like, man, like I made something pretty cool looking and like actually stuck to the schedule. So like, maybe I can do this whole environment artist thing. So yeah, one of the two.
Okay. We have someone that is interested in weapon modeling. Do you know where that might fall in terms of job position? Would that be like an environment art thing, or some other discipline entirely?
Yeah, it really depends on the studio. Like I know it id pretty much everyone that wasn't a character artist was like an environment artist. Um, and we'd have some people that would essentially break off to do like a hero piece. Like we had Robert Hodry, he broke off and did like some of the giant mechs and stuff like that. And I think there were maybe people that specifically focused on weapons there as well. And I think that's more normal for most studios is that you have, a team that like Call of Duty for sure has like their people that like all they do is make guns. So if you're really into like doing, hero props and weapons and stuff like that, like that's probably going to be what you focus on. Um, with my experience, I was like, I want to do environment art, but also, I want to make cool props because they kind of go hand in hand. So, I was making these cool hard surface props, um, but they were more, I guess, like environment focused. Because man, guns take a super long time to make. They're super detailed. You're gonna put them right up next to your guy's face, so like they got to be really cool looking. So it really kind of is almost like its own discipline. Um, but I think that, if you added like a really cool gun to your environment art portfolio and a place was looking for one or the other, I think that's an okay one to kind of like focus on both because it still is like asset creation at the end of the day. Hopefully that like kind of answers that question.
Cool. Yeah. Someone just posted a question, so um, they're wanting to know if there's any tips on graduates like still pursuing breaking into the industry as a 3D modeler or environment artist. So if you've kind of already graduated and
Mhm.
you're not still in school with a ton of time, is there any like more quickly applicable advice you could give?
Yeah, yeah, so I think he said he's a little late to the stream. I think I gave y'all the slides, and if you want to like propagate those at some point, so people can go back over them. But I mean, it's really a lot of the same stuff. Um, like I mentioned, like my plan was like I'm probably not gonna get a job right out of college, so I'm gonna go work at the rock climbing gym or deliver pizzas and just like schedule time, however many days a week I can, but schedule like 2 hours every day where it's like I'm gonna just work on this portfolio piece. And that's essentially what I did with my capstone, but to like a much higher degree. I was like, okay, Monday through I guess Thursday, like every night I'll work on my capstone for like 4, 5 hours or whatever. And I think really like blocking your time out like that helps a lot. Because I would get into the issue, and I think this is it. Like this is an issue still for me. But I'll come home and I'm like, man, I want to play some video games, and I start playing video games, and I'm like, man, I could be working on my portfolio right now. Because as an artist, it's like your portfolio is what's going to get you jobs, and like there's no point where you can't and probably shouldn't be like working on it and improving it. And it was like watching TV or like watching games, it's always in the back of my mind like I should be improving my stuff. So it made it like not fun to goof off and do other stuff, and I couldn't like like enjoy free time essentially. But when you break it up and schedule it like that, number one, you can also plan out like when you think you'll be able to do stuff, and get an actual like timeline of essentially creating milestones for yourself like that. I think that's really important, and that allows you to do that more accurately. But also, you have time set aside where you can kind of turn off the outside world and just really focus on your stuff. And if you stick to it, it's like going to the gym. Like you stick to it and like do that, do it every day, and like you stay on those hours. Like it's gonna get done at the end of the day, and you're gonna learn some awesome stuff. But again, it also enjoys you to like lets you actually not feel like dookie when you're playing video games and trying to actually have fun. So I guess that's my best advice is just like schedule that time. Even if it's just like you can only squeeze in an hour or something every day, like use that time, have an end goal, work towards something, and make it something that's going to go on your portfolio, and just keep improving on your skills and keep improving that portfolio. And yeah.
Yeah, we've got Summer back in chat, basically telling everybody to get on GitHub all the time.
Man,
Thank you,
summer's
Summer.
hardcore. Yeah, use summer as your inspiration, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay. One person is asking, would you recommend recreating environments from games, or to have some sort of theme, kind of like Cyberpunk or something, and trying to make something brand new?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question because that's actually something I meant to kind of hit on earlier, and I think I skipped over. And this is something I try. I'm still kind of active with SGDA and some people going to school, and uh, we'll kind of go back and forth on ideas for environments and stuff like that. And this is something I'm always harping on. I think that when you're a student, we kind of talked about the design principles and stuff earlier, but like you're not going to have all that stuff down. What you need to work on as a student is like the technical skills of building an environment. And by that I mean like don't spend don't spend time and resources concepting, because what you're going to come up with as a concept is going to be like just not as good as if you found like a compelling piece online and focus on that. I don't mean to like you know poop on anyone's like environment creation or like concepting ideas, but it's just like that is its own thing. Like concept artists focus for years and years on that to do one. So when you're coming up with an environment and you're trying to do both, you're essentially like branching yourself into two disciplines. So what I did was I would find a piece, like the Wolfenstein piece or the, ATEC lab or whatever, or just like a concept piece. And if you can just focus on that and not worry about like, well, will this be like a visually compelling piece in the end? Like, is the composition good? Is it a reasonable thing to do? Picking a piece right off the bat lets you break down, okay, what props are in here, lets you schedule out like the different milestones you want to hit and stuff like that. And it just again lets you to focus just purely on the technical skills. Like, can I take this and like make it a 3D thing that is good? And that's essentially the job as an environment artist. Like later on, if you become like a lead or something, then being able to concept up those areas and think a lot more design wise. Like those are all really good skills and they're going to be important, but you don't need them to like get your foot in the door in the industry. You just need to be able to take a concept and make it look really cool. Those skills are definitely a bonus, but I think that like as a student, you only have so much time like before you're going to graduate, and uh, I don't think it's as important to like use that time trying to also like split yourself on that. I say just find a cool concept online and like focus on making that a really sweet environment.
Cool. I don't see any new questions coming in just yet. I guess we can give it another minute or two, see if anything else pops up in chat.
Sure.
But otherwise, we might be pretty close to just wrapping it up.
Cool. I can show off some fun student projects if you want to
Sure,
see
go
some.
for it.
Maybe this could be like a inspiration. Here's my. I think this is like virtual environments one, maybe project number two in virtual environments one. I think this was in Unity. So this is yeah, this one's not on my portfolio. What else did I have in here? I don't know. These ones I still think are kind of cool, but I don't know if y'all still do the spaceship in 3D modeling, but there's my spaceship. I only included 3 renders because like the actual textured ones, my materials were just awful. But I thought maybe like the actual modeling part was okay and kind of cool. Oh, someone wants to see the accordion. Oh, it's Keegan, of course. Yeah, I think this was for like modeling 2, I guess. But yeah, and then some little guy. Oh, I actually like blurred out the face because it looked awful. I think it was Elizabeth Boyd told me that the face looked apish. She was my sculpting professor at the time and my modeling 1 and 2 professor. So yeah, I just straight up blurred that out and put it on art station. That's funny. Yeah. Again, some of the stuff's still cool, but it's not like up to the level that I want my portfolio to be at, like on average. So it would just bring stuff down.
We do have one more question popping up in
Okay.
here. Basically, I don't know if you felt modeling get super repetitive and soul sucking before, but kind of just in general, how do you keep the creative juices flowing?
Yeah, that's a good question. It definitely gets that way sometimes. So that is, dang, I wish I had pulled it up. So I think part of that I've mentioned a couple times now, but setting those like those milestones out. Let me see if I can pull it up on a different screen real quick. Um, let me do. So I think a big part of that is like just seeing progress get made. So this is a schedule that I made for myself for my capstone. So I broke down all these different assets. I made like a priority list of how important they would be, and finished them off. Just some loose notes on like thoughts that I had and stuff like that. And then I think this was like my overall schedule for that kind of thing. So I think that having this kind of stuff set up when you're working on a project, it might not be as important for a prop or something. I think you could do a short pass of it and still be fine. But essentially, having those milestones and hitting those, like that's what's going to keep you on track. And I have started a ton of projects that I have not finished, and none of those are in my portfolio, obviously. I think you can go on my ArtStation and look at my like blogs or something, and there's like a Dark Souls environment that I started, and like that was for school too. I think it was for environment art too, and I just didn't finish it because I like burned myself out. But if you can set up stuff like this and actually stick to it, that really helps. And have points where like it's okay to not have this part, but hit those milestones, keep working on that. I think I can maybe show it off in here, but like my kind of approach to this was, get all the basic props in. And this is specific for environments. I'm not sure how applicable it is to props, but like, you could spend a whole week just working on this like one tank here. And maybe you get it to a point and you're like, oh, this just doesn't look cool. And you work on it for another week. And you work on it for a third week and like, okay, now it looks really cool. But the rest of the environment's like not even done. So the way that I kind of avoided that was essentially just doing like a first pass model on everything. And you're like, okay, cool, tank is done, like it's like kind of blocky, janky or whatever, but like just keep going through it, work on the pipes now, work on this. And it looks like poopy dooku for like probably 80% of the project. And for a project like this, there were so many points where I was like, oh my god, like I have put so much time and work into this and it still looks awful. And you can kind of see those in these gifs, like it just doesn't look that good up until like maybe the last 2 slides. It's just going to keep looking bad, but it's like you just have to be in the mindset where like I'm just going to keep doing passes on it. I'm going to get a first pass of everything done. I'm going to do a first like texturing pass of everything. Uh, and once you get like a first pass of everything done and it starts coming together, you're like, oh, okay, like you can actually kind of see the progress you're making, and it's a lot easier to stay with it. And also by doing that, you're getting to a pass where you're like, oh man, like these wires that like I made really quick and looked really dumb up close actually don't matter. And as far as like the composition of the whole scene, and then you don't, you can be like, oh, okay, but this tank, like I actually should go back and like polish that up a little bit. But you realize like just how much you can get away with like really basic shapes and really basic texturing. So that's kind of like another bonus out of that. But it's all about seeing the progress and stuff like that. I think that's what keeps me motivated while I'm working on something, and also share it with people. This didn't work for my Dark Souls environment because I put it out online and had people following along, and then I just bailed on it. But it definitely helps. Like because I did the same thing with this one. Got it out online. I had hit up these guys from Machine Games, and I was like, "Yeah, follow along with my progress. I'm gonna do it. Like I'm gonna do it really well." I was posting it in the SGDA chat. I had a couple like environment artist friends, and we were always sending stuff back and forth and updating each other. And doing stuff like that like holds you accountable. But then you also get that feedback, and again, that's just like more, push like people seeing your stuff and reacting to it. I mean, that's what it's all about. And people being like, "Oh yeah, like I made this, clock for the wall. Doesn't it look cool?" And they're like, "Yeah, it looks cool." And then you're like, "Nice, I'm gonna keep doing stuff." So there's a couple different like aspects of that, but yeah, scheduling is really important, and just like sharing it with people, and getting feedback on it. So yeah.
All right, we got someone else asking if you have any good methods for tackling cloth props for environments.
Marvelous designer. So let me find a better picture actually. So all the cloth stuff I did for this environment, it was the first time I'd done cloth stuff, but I did it in Marvelous Designer, and I did it in like I think their trial, which at the time was maybe like 3 weeks or something. So that's pretty much like I think modeling programs are getting a little bit better with some of that stuff, but Marvelous Designer is just like really stinking good at simulating cloth, and it's relatively like easy to just look up some tutorials and do some junk for that. So that's what I used for this bed sheet, this nasty carpet rag thing on the ground. Um, I actually used it for this chair as well, for the back panel, and then for these big draping things. So essentially, you just kind of draw out what you want it to look like, press simulate, and it'll drape or fill up, whatever. You can set like anchor points for it to work around and stuff like that. And then just export that out as a FBX and bake down. Super super duper easy. And like I said, a lot of programs can do that as well, but Marvelous Designer specifically is kind of, from my understanding, still the king in that aspects.
Awesome. Was there anything like old student projects or anything that you were just showing off a minute ago that used to be in your portfolio that you've since taken off?
Ooh,
And can you speak to why?
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I think all of this was maybe technically in my portfolio at some point, but it was really just like I got to the point where my other stuff was kind of better. So like I mentioned, this TV one was kind of my like, hey, I can make detailed props kind of piece for a while, and that was good. Helped me get in there and everything. But then it was like, now that I have, detailed props from Call of Duty, it's just not quite like as compelling of a piece to have in there, you know. And so I think I mentioned it briefly earlier, but kind of just that like averaging your portfolio, like uh, these are some chairs I made for like an indie game, and like they're okay. And again, this also comes to presentation. Like this is like I think these are just screen grabs from Unreal and like one from Substance Painter, and you can see the, maybe not on the stream, but like if you actually pull it up, you can see the anti-aliasing and stuff like that. So it's like this was just never a good piece, but I had it on there at the time because I just like needed to fill up my portfolio so I could try to get an internship at Groove Jones at the time, and just have something on there. But then like as you're making new stuff, some of the other stuff is just gonna kind of bring down the overall average. So got to I think the term for like pitching games, what like you got to kill your babies, which is just an awful term. But learned it at UTD. Go Comets. So yeah, got to kill your babies.
All right. So we, I definitely wasn't laughing on mute there. We have someone who says they're trying to transition from hard surface to organic modeling,
Ooh.
and they're saying it's really jarring, and they're wondering if you have any advice for that.
Yeah, that's a fun one. So I don't know if it's like evident through like what's actually on my portfolio, but I'm like much more hard surface focused than organic. I think maybe some of the fungal environment stuff was like maybe some of the only organic work I have on here. And it's not even super clear on these photos like what I actually worked on. Um, I made this little plant. I don't know if these little red plants are even visible. I made some decals and stuff like that. Uh, a lot of like this stuff that was made by other people, but it's really like pretty much all of this was done in like ZBrush. Because like the traditional modeling stuff, like I think Blender's sculpting stuff is like pretty cool. But again, ZBrush is just a really incredible piece of software. So it's a lot of just like learning that program specifically and just working that into kind of the workflow that you're already familiar with and baking down. And a lot of the placement and composition stuff will ultimately still be the same, but it's just a different workflow to make it. And that's really the best advice I can give on that because I'm not super strong in organic modeling myself. And that's another thing where, maybe that's like what you want to focus your portfolio on. Like if you're just really into organic modeling, do some really cool organic environments. And then if there's a studio that's like, yeah, this is like a, you know, part of our art team that we're missing is like someone that's just really good at this stuff, then like that's your way in. Um, and it may be a thing where, I personally I wish that I had like more organic stuff on my portfolio and that I was stronger in both. But if you're finding like one or the other just really hard to do, maybe just focus on hard surface stuff if that's like something you're also interested in. Like it's one of those things, splitting your time, like figure out what your strength is, figure out if that's like something that can get you hired, and then just like really focus on getting that up to the quality that you need to get in the door. Yeah.
Cool. We've got one person asking if you have an opinion on making basically like a graveyard blog post on ArtStation, like commenting on a lot of your old work.
Ooh, interesting. So repeat that for me.
What are your thoughts on making a graveyard blog post on ArtStation about all of your old work?
Dang, I haven't seen one of those. That's a really interesting idea, actually. I don't know. That's actually I hadn't thought of that before. That could be interesting if people are like actually interested in something like that. I don't know if people read this. I'm trying to see where I thought I had blogs on here. Maybe not. But yeah, no, that's kind of a cool idea. I was gonna show where I kind of broke down my uh oh there you go. I was gonna show where I kind of broke down some of this stuff. Um, because this was like kind of going through. This was while I was making my capstone, and I was kind of just posting my stuff every week. So I'm not sure what that would look like as like a essentially like a post mortem on some of my projects, but that's a really cool idea. I'm gonna think about that. Hmm.
Okay, so essentially, like you don't know if it'll get you like any sort of industry advantage or
Oh, gotcha.
anything,
Like
but
if that would be something useful. Okay, sorry. I took that as like someone was like, "Oh yeah, like you should. Would you do this?"
I don't
No.
know. I mean, they only asked for like your thoughts on it, so
Yeah, no, I don't know. I've never seen anyone do that. I don't think it would hurt. I think having like I don't know that anyone that was actually like interviewing me went through and read this blog post or anything. But I think it's really good to document, not if just for yourself, but also for other people that are going to come across it. Because finding posts like this for me was super helpful, and it can be like an inspiration thing as well to find this and see like how stuff looked throughout the way. Um, but Yeah, that's really all I got on there. I don't know that it's necessarily like something that would help you get a job, but I do think it's like probably good for you to do just for yourself. I think you learn some stuff about what you're making, and maybe show some other people some stuff that'll be helpful for them.
Cool. Um, do you have any tips on like different connection sites? So ArtStation is the pretty common one, but
Hmm.
would DeviantArt like be a good place to post your art? Because they apparently also have a portfolio option,
Interesting.
or even
I
like
don't know.
LinkedIn or Handshake. Would you post there?
I think posting your art on LinkedIn's good. I was doing that. I post on LinkedIn. I post on Twitter. I don't think I used Handshake. At one point, I had like an Adobe portfolio site, but once ArtStation took over, this is pretty much the only place I was really like keeping my stuff up to date. I think Twitter is really good. You can post something on Twitter and like at Unreal Engine at Polycount, and just like bug those people, and like they'll probably retweet you if your stuff's really cool. And also through doing that, I ended up getting on the Epic Games like launch page. Like when you go to this thing right here, like the little featured screenshots. I got my I think it was maybe my capstone. Maybe it was the Simon Sayle hat. I don't know. One of those got on here. And like I don't know if that drove people to my portfolio, but like stuff like that can happen by putting your stuff out there. And there's multiple sites to do it on, but like I said, Twitter I think is a really good one to like connect and to be able to get like retweeted and stuff like that. My Twitter pretty much is now like entirely art focused, and that's like what I see because I unfollowed a bunch of my friends from high school and a bunch of like funny people that I used to get memes from, and now it's just all art. And I do miss it sometimes. I miss memes. You still get some good like art memes and game memes, but you know, focusing like again like surrounding yourself with like really cool art and like cool resources. A lot of it's like it's a lot, but I think subconsciously like you'll pick up a lot or just find more cool stuff that way. You don't have to always actively search for it, but just like I did the same thing with my YouTube. I made a second YouTube and I just tried to get the algorithm to just show me game dev stuff all the time. And that's just like a good way to kind of, get kind of what's the word, like inundated with that stuff. Like just have it thrown at you all the time. ArtStation, like the main page is my home page. Like anytime I open a new tab. So I'm just like blasted with all this really cool art and just kind of look through a couple of these every day, and kind of just keep up to date on stuff. So it's good to surround yourself with that. And it's also good to be on, those sites and put your stuff out there. That was a very like tangential answer, but hopefully that works.
No, that's good. I I definitely do the same thing on Twitter though.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Next
yeah.
question.
Do you know if like employers ever look at who you're following and what posts you're reacting to and stuff like that? Is that common?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know because I've been part of like interviewing people and looking through people's stuff. I try not to like anything like weird or questionable on my art station. Just I mean, just in case. I mean, you never know. Uh, I would like suggest do the same on Twitter on whatever because it really depends on like the studio, but you know, it's really hard to tell like what they're gonna get into. Just like good stuff. But I don't know that anyone's ever looked at my stuff and be like, oh man, he likes really cool stuff, so he must be a really like well-rounded artist. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't like stalked people that hard when we were looking at them.
Okay, cool. Um, I oh someone Summer is saying she interviews people,
Yeah,
and checks social media. Okay, thank you, Summer.
yeah.
Um, glad to know that stalking is a common occurrence. Um, oh boy. Okay, we got another long question in chat. What is the industry standard as to how many texture sets a model should have? Someone's doing modeling work for a Half-Life mod project and found themselves limiting to like one texture set for props and
Mhm.
2 to 3 texture sets for player weapons. Is that like too many textures for one gun?
Gotcha.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it entirely depends on the project workflow. So again, like one thing I was really surprised to see on like the Call of Duty stuff was pretty much all their stuff is like I never made a texture for any prop I was working. Well, no, technically I made a couple textures, but for the most part, I didn't make textures for like most of the props I worked on. It was all stuff that they already had. So like this, for instance, it was like this, just this like wooden prop was probably like maybe like 7 or 10 different texture sets. And so the way they did that, it was like you'd have this like default wood texture, and then you had like a rusted tiling metal texture. And so it was all like tiling stuff. And then let me see how big I can make this. So then you would also come and do like a grunge pass. So like all the kind of like the I don't know. Again, you probably can't even see this on stream, uh, but you can kind of see there's like some grunge in there, and all those are just like floating geo that has this like transparent grunge texture on it. And that was pretty much how like all the COD stuff was made. You would take these tiling materials and these trim sheets and place them into there, and then you would go and add in like for instead of texturing in like substance painter or something where you're like dirtying it up, you would just take like existing textures and do them. So again, like I don't know if it's viewable on stream, but this like drawer has like kind of a gradient to it, and that's because there's just like this grunge, texture that I just like made a face and like put it as close as possible to, and it's just like a different texture. So that was their workflow specifically, and they did the same thing with like metal. You would have like a trim of like geo running all the way down. There would be like a separate texture for like scratching, and like all this stuff is different ones. Like this one was probably like I don't know, like 9 texture sets in this one thing. Um, if you're making the texture specifically for an asset, then like you can get away with just doing one or something like that. But the thing with these were all like super tiny textures. Like the blue one was maybe like uh, I don't know, like 518 or something like that. Like just really small textures, and then you could use like a lot more materials, and that's how they get their stuff looking really good and running at 60 frames a second is because they're using the same materials essentially like all throughout the map. So it's only having to call those materials once, and maybe it's calling like like 7 material calls for like each asset, but they're being used like also over here and like on this stuff and on this stuff, and it just ends up being like optimal for the way that they're making stuff. But again, that's their like super crazy, super proven workflow that they've been using for years. So I don't know if like for a smaller project if that would be a good way to go about it. But that being said, having more than like 1 or 2 materials on a prop is totally fine. With my stuff, even for like, I've kind of adapted this workflow in like a smaller way where I'll have like one main custom texture for it, and then I'll just have like tiling textures for like 1 or 2, parts that I don't want to add into there, but I want to have like really good detail on. So that's totally fine. Hopefully that
All right.
helps.
I mean, it sounded good to me. We've got one person that wants to know how much quads matter in modeling. Is it really that important to have all quads for a model?
Oh man, no, not at all. I think that's part of UTD and ATEC starting as like an animation program primarily, because that was how I was taught. Was in Maya, and it was like everything needs to be quads and have like super great mesh flow and stuff like that. And then I started making like props for Call of Duty, and it's like super freaking janky. And there's just like wacky triangles of different scales all over the place, and you do stuff that's just like illegal in animation modeling, and it's just like yeah, game models are cool and rad. So no, don't worry about that. I mean, you don't want to have like n-gons and stuff like that, but like you don't need to keep everything quads. You can get really like gross and dirty with your topology.
Cool. Again, we don't really have any more questions at the moment.
Yeah.
We can give it another minute or two, see if anything else pops up. Do you have anything else that you'd like to show off portfolio wise?
Mm, I don't know. I did some photogrammetry stuff. This isn't something that would be like necessary to get a job as an environment artist, but photogrammetry is really cool to learn how to do to like scan stuff and bring it in. So I don't know. That's a fun like side kind of thing to work on. But not really. I mean, if people have questions, like if any of y'all have a question you think of later or something like that, I'll pull up my info again. But feel free to hit me up on ArtStation or in Discord or Twitter, wherever you prefer. I'm always down to like help. Like I'll critique environments you're working on or props you're working on, or if you have like a specific question, just hit me up because I'm always open to answering that kind of stuff. I think like helping people as an artist makes you a better artist because you're reflecting on like a lot of things. And I think like the other day I was giving some like composition advice on something, and I was like, oh man, like I'm using like design principles, like I really get it. So like as much as you can like continue doing that stuff and like reinforcing your skills on something, I think that's really important. So uh, all that said, I just like helping people.
Yeah, and in case anyone like hasn't noticed or anything, Tyler is a mod on the SGDA server, so ideally he's pretty easy to reach.
Yep.
Um, yeah, okay, we got one more question asking, how do you do low poly from high poly? They want to
Oh
optimize their workflow.
man, yeah. A couple different ways to do that. Um, you can like manually retopologize the whole thing. You can go in and like in Blender, you can put a modifier on it to reduce it. You can reduce it in ZBrush and like Z remesh the whole thing. There's a couple different ways to do that. You could even just generate some like auto LODs in Unreal and like just hope it looks okay. Uh, yeah, there's a lot of kind of different ways to approach that. It really depends, like specifically, like how low poly you're wanting it, what the high poly is. When I was freelancing for Group Jones, a lot of like what we did was taking like Turbo Squid animation models that were like crazy high poly and trying to make them work on like a phone augmented reality camera thing, which had to be like crazy optimized. And let me tell you, it's not fun. One of my least favorite things I've ever worked on. So yeah, good luck with that. Have fun. The decimate, it messes up the topology. So like if you're doing something for animation, you probably wouldn't want to do that if you want to keep the stuff. But Z brushes, I think it's Z remesher or maybe quad remesher. I don't remember what it's called, but it'll kind of keep the flow for the most part. So there's ways to even go in and like paint, how you want the general topology to flow and stuff like that. So there's a lot of kind of tricks for those, but they're not something I'm like super up to date on.
Okay. Does doing stuff like Fusion 360 models translate well to making props?
I don't know what Fusion 360 is, but I'm gonna assume it's some kind of like CAD sort of engineering 3D modeling thing. And I don't know. I haven't done engineering modeling in like CAD with like proper measurements and stuff like that, but I am pretty positive some of these skills transfer. Um, but if you're gonna go for like a prop game dev role or something like that, I would probably suggest making it in like a more game dev centric modeling program and you know doing it through that to prove that you actually like know the workflow and stuff outside of like uh, an engineering program. But again, don't know what Fusion 360 is, so maybe totally off base on answering that.
That sounded good to me. They said it was modeling engineering stuff like
Yeah.
Fusion 360 models. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's accurate.
Mm,
Um,
hopefully.
do you have any thoughts on Blender 2.9?
I have looked through the new features and stuff, and I'm pumped about it. But also, I'm like still learning like Blender 2.8, so I'm also scared because there's new stuff to learn. But yeah, I think Blender is doing awesome. I think they've gotten with Blender 2.8, like they got a ton of grants and money and stuff like that. So now is the time to become a Blender user. I'm here to preach Blender. It's a great program. Sponsor.
We've got someone asking, does everyone at a studio need to follow a certain workflow, or does everyone kind of just do their own thing, or how does that all work together?
Again, it depends on the studio. Like if you're at a really small indie place, you can kind of get away with like going crazy with whatever your material setup is and putting in assets and doing stuff kind of just to make it look good, and then figuring out optimization later. Versus like if you're, for instance, I don't know, contracting for like Black Ops 4 with like Activision or something, then they like send you a literal like asset review form that you have to like fill out and have like a screenshot thumbnail of your assets and list every single material and follow like very specific guidelines for your workflow. So it really varies from like studio to studio, but I think generally having like a good core workflow for everyone to go through just helps like the project in the end, and then also helps you like work together to make stuff. So yeah.
All right. Did you ever take Game Lab when you were a student here?
Sure did. Foreman Shadow, semester 2, I think,
Oh
was my
boy.
thing. Yeah, I don't know if anyone remembers Foreman Shadow, but yeah, it didn't turn out great.
No. How'd you like that class?
It was Game Lab, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. But again, like this kind of goes back to what I was saying about like being selfish and like working on your stuff. Like, had I used that semester to just like make a 3D environment, I would maybe have something that like could actually go in my portfolio or have learned some really cool program or something like that. But Game Lab also like gave me all of these soft skills that make me a better dev now about like how to communicate with people. I think like I was a level designer at one point, and then like my entire level got cut, and I was like, man, that stinks. But good to the project, like all that stuff. Being able to talk to programmers is like a skill you got to figure out. Still working on that. So all those soft skills are really important. So I would recommend taking Game Lab if you can. Also, I think it was just a ton of fun, and I made like some of my best friends, that I still talk to in Game Lab. So it's yeah, I'm not saying like don't do it, but just don't expect to have like some crazy cool game that'll like get you a job when you get out of it.
Yeah, at this point, I know they're doing like just one massive project, I guess,
Yeah.
which would better simulate what life is like in the industry. So I think that's
Yeah.
pretty
Oh,
cool.
yeah, yeah. Cause Tim and, Adam Chandler are running it
Yep.
now, I think? Yeah.
Yeah, both of
I
them.
I remember, yeah, because when I was, graduating, I talked to him about his plans for Game Lab, and, I've talked to him a couple times about it, and I'm pretty excited to see where it goes. And also, if the world ever goes back to normal, I normally go to, like, the Game Lab, presentations and stuff like that when I can, so may see some of y'all there. But I really enjoyed like the experience. Like I'm saying, I think I was like probably too negative on it. I actually did really like Game Lab, and I think the changes that they're bringing to it are going to be really good because a lot of the like critiques that I had of it, I told to like Tim directly and was like, yeah, this is like why it wasn't that good, and he like gets a lot of that and is changing a lot of that. So I think y'all are going to be in a good spot with your big fancy Alienwares and your upgraded Game Lab. So have fun.
Yeah, I definitely feel some of that though, like because I'm taking the class for the first time this semester, and
Mhm.
I've already gotten the sense that like they're they're basically saying, anything that you're experiencing in the class, like write it down, bring it to us later, so that we can always
Mhm.
improve, which I really admire.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, again, like, I really love Tim Lewis. He's a great professor.
Yeah, I could tell. um, I think we already touched on this question a little bit before, but they're just asking what you use to set up your portfolio. Is it just ArtStation? Is that the only thing that you prefer?
Yep. Yeah, just ArtStation. I get everything set up on ArtStation. I don't even use their, like, they have, like, a website version you can use and make, like, a proper portfolio website, but I don't mess with any of that. I just link people straight to the base one. I got ArtStation Pro so that I can make, private like posts and just gets I don't remember what all it adds, but it's some extra fancy stuff and it puts a little pro next to your name so people know you're legit. But yeah, I just use ArtStation and I just link that on my applications and I link it all over the place on Twitter. Um, I think it's number one, it's just a super clean layout. It's really easy to use, and the fact that it's also like a social media and people can like find you through there, just I don't know why you would want to put your portfolio anywhere else. And like I said, like I found a job through here. They were just like probably typed in like Dallas and looked at artists in Dallas and saw my stuff and they're like, yeah, this is cool, and messaged me like through ArtStation. So not saying that like sign up and you'll get a job through it, but eh, possibility.
Okay, not bad. Again, it seems like we've run out of questions, I think, unless I missed something in chat. Um, So, unless there's anything else you have for us, I mean, we could probably start wrapping it up. I know we're
Sure.
uh, starting to come up on 2 hours, so
Oh, geez,
uh,
already? Oh man.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. No, that's pretty much my spiel. Like I said, if there's anything that I didn't address, or if just like months from now you're working on something and just want some eyes on it, feel free to bug me because I am around. So yeah, and I desperately crave social interaction because of the remote work and quarantine. So I'm here. But yeah, no, thanks for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun.
yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed this one. I'm always stuck in the CS world, so I really like hearing about your insight.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
then next week you guys have Tomaseski.
yeah, the other Tyler,
He's great. He's a great dude.
gonna be talking about some more of the indie side of things.
Hmm.
So we're really looking forward to having him too. I guess before we close down the stream, I will remind everybody that we have T-shirt pre-orders up. Um, I don't know if one of my other officers can throw that link in chat one more time for me. That'd be awesome. Um, and then, yeah, Tyler Tomaseski is coming up next week. There will be an ad posted in the server and other social medias here shortly. So be looking forward to that. Oh, and then anyone else who is like relatively new to the server, make sure you pick a role for yourself. We have a role selection channel. It'll open up a bunch of our other interactive channels. So if you think we have a small server, we do not. It's just hidden to you until you choose a role. And then we also really appreciate people that can use their real names in the server, especially being like remote. I think just using real names like helps you connect a little bit better with your peers. So we have instructions on how to change your nickname within the server in our rules and info channel on the Discord. So with that said, Henry, I guess we can go ahead and close down the stream. Thank you everybody for coming out.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.